Welcome back. When we last left Silas Thorne, he had begun to trade the clock for the compass, swapping profit reports for poetry, deadlines for sketches, and a life of rushing for moments that made him truly alive. But change has a way of inviting new challenges, and on one rainy afternoon, a quiet knock at his door would set the next chapter of his story in motion. One rainy afternoon, Silas was at his drafting table sketching when there was a knock at his office door. It was Emily, his niece, whom he hadn't seen in years. She looked hesitant, standing in the doorway with damp hair and tired eyes. "Uncle Silas," she began softly, "I need advice." They sat together and she told him about her struggles, a job she hated, a dream she felt was slipping away. As she spoke, Silas realized her story sounded painfully familiar. Instead of offering his usual financial wisdom, he told her about his creative writing class, the art center, and the compass he had once traded for a clock. Emily left with a small smile, saying, "Maybe it's not too late for me either." That night, Silas wrote a poem for Emily, not about her problems, but about courage, beginnings, and the quiet bravery of choosing a new path. He mailed it to her, handwritten in careful script. A week later, she called in tears, saying it was the most meaningful gift she had ever received. It was the first time Silas realized that his words could reach beyond himself. His poems were no longer just a personal refuge. They were a way to touch the lives of others. That thought stayed with him, urging him to keep writing. Marjorie from the art center invited Silas to an exhibition featuring local amateur artists. He hesitated, feeling he wasn't ready to share his sketches, but she insisted. "Art isn't about being ready," she said. "It's about being seen." At the event, his drawings were displayed alongside others. People paused to look, some even asking questions. He wasn't the best artist there, but the experience filled him with a strange warmth. For once, the act of being vulnerable felt like a victory. One morning, the financial market took a sharp downturn, threatening several of Silas's investments. The old panic rose quickly, filling his mind with numbers, losses, and strategies to fix everything. He felt the pull of his former life, the urge to throw himself completely back into work. Instead, he closed his office door and picked up his guitar. He played until his heartbeat slowed. Then, with a clearer head, he addressed the business problem calmly. The storm had passed, both outside and within. While taking his usual evening walk, Silas stopped at a small coffee shop he had never noticed before. It was quiet, with shelves of second-hand books along the walls. He struck up a conversation with the barista, a young woman studying photography. They spoke about creativity, risk, and chasing passions. When she asked what he did, Silas said simply, "I write." It was the first time he had introduced himself that way, and it felt completely right. A week later, the barista gave Silas a black and white photograph she had taken of him that evening, sitting by the window, notebook open, lost in thought. She said it had a storyteller's stillness. Silas framed it and placed it on his office shelf as a reminder that even in quiet moments, he was living the story he wanted to tell. The photograph became a small anchor, something to look at whenever he felt himself drifting back toward the life he no longer wanted. The Community Art Center invited Silas to speak at their annual fundraiser. At first, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't an artist in the traditional sense, and he didn't think his journey was remarkable. But when he spoke about rediscovering lost dreams, the audience listened closely. Afterwards, several people came up to share their own stories. Silas realized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a bridge that connected him to others in ways money never could. While cleaning out his attic, Silas found his original guitar case from college. It was scratched, the handle frayed, but it carried a lifetime of memories. Inside was a folded sheet of music for a song he had written at 21. That night he played it again, the melody soft but steady. It was like shaking hands with a younger version of himself. The years between them felt less like a gap and more like a bridge he had finally crossed. Silas decided to combine his writing and sketching into a small illustrated poetry book. It wasn't for profit, It was for himself and anyone who might find comfort in it. He spent evenings working on it, losing track of time as words and drawings took shape. The process was slow but deeply satisfying. For the first time in decades, he wasn't measuring his success in numbers, but in moments of joy. Emily visited again, this time with brighter eyes and a lighter step. She told Silas she had left her job and was starting a small photography business. "Your poem helped me see what I was missing," she said. Silas felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not for her career choice but for her courage. He realized that sometimes the best thing you can give someone isn't advice, but permission to believe in themselves. One afternoon, a visitor at the art center offered to buy one of Silas's sketches. At first, he refused, saying it wasn't for sale. But the man insisted, saying the drawing reminded him of his childhood home. Silas accepted, not for the money, but for the knowledge that something he created had touched another person deeply. It was a feeling no business deal had ever given him. Silas rented a small cabin by a lake for a week. Without internet or phone service, he spent his days writing, painting, and sitting on the porch watching the water shift with the light. The quiet felt like a luxury. He realized how much noise he had let into his life without noticing. By the time he returned to the city, he carried with him a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. Encouraged by friends at the art center, Silas attended a local open mic night. His hands shook as he read one of his poems aloud, but when he finished, the room erupted in applause. Afterward, a man in the audience thanked him, saying the poem had reminded him to call his estranged brother. Silas walked home that night feeling that his words had done something important. They had sparked connection. Marjorie began teaching Silas more about painting, showing him techniques she had learned over the years. She was patient, guiding his hand when it faltered. "Art," she said, "isn't about perfection. It's about telling the truth without words." Silas applied her advice not just to painting, but to his writing, his music, and even his conversations. He stopped trying to make everything perfect and started aiming for honest instead. For years, Silas had avoided family gatherings, always using work as an excuse. But this year he attended. At first, it felt strange. So many faces, so many stories he had missed. But as the night went on, he found himself laughing, telling stories, and even playing guitar for his relatives. It struck him how much life he had missed while chasing achievements. He promised himself not to let those connections fade again.